Hi everyone, I'm Jen T with ARINGO, and we are so excited to have you today to talk about Kellogg and how to prepare for the interview. Super excited for you to join us. So just a couple of housekeeping moments. One is that we will have a Q&A session at the end. So use the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen in your controls to ask any questions that you might have as we go along during the session, and I'll answer them at the end. I'm a little bit notorious for answering too many questions and not making it to the very end, but we're going to do that today. So you guys keep me on track, and we'll make sure that you guys are ready and prepared for your Kellogg interview. Okay, so to get started, just a little bit about myself. I'm Jen T. I'm the CEO of ARINGO MBA Admissions. We've been around for over 20 years, and we've been helping people get into top MBA programs across the globe, including Kellogg. So our statistics speak for themselves. They're posted on our website if you want to see anything. But essentially, we help with all parts of the application process, from strategy to essays to interview prep and strategy negotiations or waitlist assistance. So we're here, and I'll have my contact information at the end if you want to set up a time to chat. All right, so jumping right in, we are going to talk about Kellogg specifically and what makes Kellogg different from other schools, which is imperative when thinking about how to craft your answers for their questions. So if you've already written your application and you got that interview invite, or you're still waiting, don't worry. They're going to roll out I would say they roll out, and there's not a particular order or rhyme or reason to it. So don't try to be like, oh gosh, like somebody else from my country or my industry got an invite and I didn't yet. They roll out and at a slow, like not a slow pace, but a consistent pace. And so don't be worried if you haven't got your interview yet. So as I was saying, if you've written your application, you already know these things, but it's great to reinforce them. The Kellogg culture is dictated by this high impact, low ego. And this is really talking about, making sure that you're leading the group, but it's not all about you if you're the leader, or, anybody can be part of that. And when you're talking about different parts of your experience in the interview, this is a great thing to kind of reference your historical, versions of this throughout your experience. The curriculum is highly customizable, and it has 8 majors and specialized pathways. So this is another great way to kind of talk about how Kellogg is the right place for you, because they have these courses or paths that you can take that are going to be coinciding directly with your career path and what you want to do, and what you need out of an MBA. And they have a strong emphasis on experiential learning. And so being able to talk about how that helps you and will get you in the field and be more productive even faster is a great focus. And then beyond that, there's these other great options for you to do field-based projects, lab courses, etc. as part of the program, and it's good to know about them as well. And then just really quickly, after this session where we talk about the interview prep, there's actually going to be a Kellogg student that's going to also be joining to share all about their experiences. So make sure that you will listen to them and see what they have to share about their experiences and how these different things play out throughout their time at Kellogg. All right, so the interview format is typically a 30 or 40-minute session with someone from the Kellogg community. And so that can be an alum, it can be a student or an admissions committee member, but they typically are only referencing your resume. So they don't have your essays, they don't have a background about you. So you can feel free to, rehash anything that you put in your application because they haven't read it yet. So you're not, repeating information they've already learned about you. So that's, kind of a really, I would say it's an advantage in this situation, of being able to say like, okay, I already have some scenarios prepped that I know about my experiences and how to talk through them, and I can use them in the interview. If it wasn't blind, then you want to find new experiences to share. So they also want to talk about your goals, right? Like they want to see about your fit with Kellogg and making sure that it makes sense for you to attend Kellogg and that you're going to get into the career that you want to be. There's also this personality of Kellogg, right? Like they're known as one of the most social, highly connected cohorts. And you want to be able to emulate that that's an environment that you thrive in. You can still be an introvert and thrive in an extroverted community, but you need to kind of make sure that they can see that and see examples of how you've been able to kind of be successful in their kind of environment. So I would say that we usually talk about the STAR method for being able to answer your behavioral questions. I kind of also like to talk about adding takeaways or learnings at the end. So first you talk about the situation, the task, the action, result, and then your takeaways or what you learned from that experience, so that it makes your whole experience that you're sharing come full circle to say, I went through this and this is what I learned, and it's helped me grow into the future or whatever it might be. And then as far as this interview goes, and for most MBA programs, they really want to know why their specific school, why Kellogg. And so you want to make sure that you are integrating these special parts about the MBA program with them. So as far as expected questions, you can expect that they're going to ask you all these whys. They're going to ask you to walk them through your resume. And so with that, I actually kind of, beyond just having a cohesive narrative, I usually tell our clients to try to think of what's something that you want them to grab onto or understand or remember about you. And so you could even start with, ever since I was a little kid, I've always been a problem solver. I loved puzzles. I loved word problems, etc. That interest and excitement grew when I was in college, and I decided to follow a path in chemistry. And after that, I went into this, and this, and I was building X, Y, and Z, and now I want to do this. So I kind of feel like if you can give them something to grab onto, then later on, whenever they're going to, write their notes or provide them for the adcom whenever they make their decisions, they can be like, oh yeah, you remember that girl, that problem solver girl? Like they can go back and think about those moments, and it's really helpful, I think, to kind of give you a bit of a brand. So why now? So it's important for them to be able to see that you have enough experience for the MBA to make sense, for you to have referential experiences to go back to when you're in class and say like, okay, this, I might not have been on the marketing team, but I now have that perspective of what maybe the marketing team was trying to do and understand better how my role fit into that. But having somewhere to kind of go back and reference and recall what happened, and be able to talk about that in class too, right? Like they want a diversity of people from different experiences. And so they want you to be able to show you have experiences that you can share it in the classroom with your classmates so they gain exposure to the field or job that you were in as well. And then again, you kind of want to align that with Kellogg, right? Like, so I've spent my past X years doing this type of thing, and now I want to pivot and move over here. And to get there, I need Kellogg. And that's why now. And then the other thing that they're going to ask you is, what are your short-term and long-term goals? Why is an MBA relevant for that? So you do want to be pretty specific here. I would say you can list a couple of different companies. I'm looking to go into the consumer goods and products industry, looking at, Walmart, Target, and another brand, HP, or no, not HP, but like looking at another brand, and I want to go into product management. And so with that being said, you're giving them a little bit of room to think like, okay, great. She's not narrow-minded about like, I only want this, or it's MBB or bust, right? Like if you say you want to be in consulting, you want to give them a little bit of wiggle room to say, okay, great. Like she's going to be open to negotiations or, considering multiple companies when, she graduates, but then also like the role and the background makes sense. And then I'm saying you need to have this specificity of like what you want to do, but then you also want to have a backup plan, right? So everything seems to be shifting quite frequently around the entire world. And so, different industries change very quickly and rapidly. And so they want to be able to see that you might not get a job in product as a product manager, but maybe you could get one as you could do project management or program management or something like that, right? So you can do something adjacent or an adjacent field or industry. And then lastly, again, why Kellogg? You want to reinforce what makes Kellogg special to you. All right, so now we'll talk about the how. So the schools want to be able to hear and learn about your leadership and teamwork experience. So this is what these interviewers are going to be asking about. So a lot of the times it's tell me a time when or describe a time when. And so thinking back to the themes of what we talked about of what Kellogg really stands for and what their environment is, think of a way to show what your high impact, low ego might have looked like in a different scenario. Or tell me a time you managed a difficult team member or conflict. So these are common questions that they're going to ask to get to know you, what you do in these situations. And even if you weren't successful, it's still a good story to share. Right? Like, so these MBA admissions committees, they don't expect everybody to have this rosy, amazing experience. They, like life it's complicated. And so, you can show the messy side of things, but then what sense you made of that experience. So again, like you can talk about a failure or, a time that things didn't go well or that you had a conflict with a team member. Those are all fine stories to share. They actually, the interviewer typically walks away remembering it even more. So then they want to know about your self-awareness. What's your greatest strengths and weaknesses? Describe a professional setback or failure and what you learned. So these are things about, a large part of an MBA program is about your leadership development. And so the self-awareness is important to be able to reflect on what you're good at and what you need help with. A lot of the times the teams will call it leadership 360, right? And so you want to be able to have a little bit of that humility and humbleness coming in. So don't be worried that like if you say that you have to make your weaknesses also a strength, like I'm really meticulous about details. And so you're like, oh, but wait, that's a strength too. It doesn't have to be that way. Like you can, I had this really cool candidate just the other day. We were actually preparing for the Kellogg interview, and she said that she has a really hard time saying no. And so she said, I haven't gotten to the point where I can just say no. She said, but now I say yes, but, and she puts contingencies on it. And so I thought it was a really cool way of showing not just like self-awareness, but like knowing that you're not there yet, but you're working on it. Okay, so the next thing is how will you contribute or fit in with Kellogg? And so this is that moment to like really show your research of what you've learned about Kellogg, how it resonates with you. And so thinking about clubs, activities that seem like something that align with what you want to do when you're on campus is, amazing. I would say keep it to maybe 2 or 3 organizations. Don't throw out 5 or 10. You want to know that you have limited time while you're there. You still have to do your studies. You still have to recruit. You have a lot of things going on. So you're not going to be able to be part of every organization. So trying to be more narrow in your specific time that you're going to be spending there, and say like, I'm going to give deeply or be really involved in these 2 to 3 clubs and hopefully take a leadership role. And then the other part is like, what are you excited about? And this is another great way to talk about like even like being in Evanston, right? Like Evanston is not exactly Chicago, but it is Chicago. So you get this city experience and access, but yet you still have a little bit of that campus feel. So, you know, it's kind of the best of both worlds. And so if you're really interested in public service or tutoring, mentoring, there's a lot of programs where they work with inner city kids. So this is an opportunity to, you know, bring that side of things into your interview as well and show your research. All right. So next, we're going to talk about the questions of behavioral fit. I'm sorry. No, we're going to talk about, sorry. There we go. Sorry. Yep. Okay. Next, we're going to talk about the unexpected questions. What questions like you're like, oh, wow, they're going to surprise me. But the great thing is that every single one of these unexpected questions all relate back to this how and why and when kind of thing. And so, you know, like if somebody asks you an off the wall question, take a moment, take a breath. It's okay. Like think about how it relates back to your why MBA, why Kellogg, and then see how you can tie the story in. And the way that we usually do this is by identifying 3 or 4 core stories that you have experiences that you can use and break down and show multiple ways that that scenario played out as far as how you were able to be successful or maybe not successful in different parts of your experiences, whether that's professional, academic, or even personal, right? Like they want to get to know you. And then there's always, again, you want to connect that back to Kellogg and you want to be authentic. So again, if you can't think of something immediately, it's okay to take a minute and say, hey, great question. Give me a minute to think about it. And that's okay, right? Like they're not going to be like, like, why don't they have something automatically prepared for this? But, you know, this is your time. You've got to think about some stories that you want to share with the admissions committee, sometimes that show your team work, your leadership skills, a time that you were able to meet a challenge. And, you know, I think like one of the questions was like, what's your greatest accomplishment or your greatest failure or a failure? They usually don't ask your greatest failure. That seems a little too crazy, but you can kind of have time to reflect on how that makes sense for the admissions committee. So then we're going to talk really quickly about the end of the interview. So you always want to come to the interview with a couple of questions to ask. And again, if it's blind, you're not really going to know who your interviewer is. But I say that you can kind of tailor it to who it does become, right? Like if it's a student, then you want to ask them about their experience and how they've been able to experience, for my example, like the Pay It Forward network, or, you know, the Pay It Forward part of the program or atmosphere, and how that's played out or how they've been a part of that as a student, or how that's impacted them as an alum. And then if it's an AdCom member, then you can ask them, likely they either are currently in Evanston or close, or they were on campus. Sometimes they ask some folks from like leadership teams and career and things like that to do the interviews. So they may not be on campus right now, but they have been. And so you can ask them about like, what was the, you know, the most transformational time you saw while you were at Kellogg, or, you know, it doesn't have to be that grand, or what was your favorite part of Evanston, or any recommendations for me as a runner. I'm looking forward to being able to run in the parks or whatever it might be. You don't want to ask the questions that you can find online. And you also don't want to ask questions that show you didn't do your research or that Kellogg isn't the right fit for you. So I was going to write out this elaborate example of like, I want to go into fashion, but I don't see a lot of fashion integrated into the curriculum or a fashion club. How have you seen fashion, iterated into the curriculum, or, have you known anybody to do fashion at Kellogg? Then you're like saying like, I don't think this is the right place for me, right? Like if you're saying like, I don't see what I'm looking for here. Can you help me find it? Well, then why did you apply? So the way to, kind of flip that is to say, I'm really interested in fashion. I know that there are clubs that are adjacent to it, and I'm interested in maybe even potentially starting my own club as it relates to sustainability and fashion, or sustainability and consumer goods, or whatever it might be. So you can say, like, what advice would you have for me? Right? So in the end, your goal is to make sure that you are showing your commitment to the school, to the MBA, and that you have this intellectual curiosity. And I like to say that there's a bit of a psychology to an interview, that you want the person who's doing the interview to feel like they contributed to your understanding and knowledge about the school, and that they've played a part in the next steps. So let them lead the actual interview and ask the questions. Don't just come in and spill it all on them. So let them ask the questions. And then the other part of it is, to make sure that you ask them for advice, or ask them for their thoughts or something like that, so that they, again, feel like they've made that contribution and they've shared a little bit about Kellogg. So when they leave the interview, they feel good. And then they go and fill out the evaluation form and hopefully fill it out with a yes. Do admit this person. Okay, so that was my slides. So I know I went through them really quickly. So let's go ahead and start working on the Q&A. You guys may have seen Alina in the chat. She's going to help us with going through the different questions that you guys have. And Alina, do you mind telling me how much time we have left?
Yes, sure. First of all, hi everyone, and thank you, Jen, for the presentation. We have about 20 minutes for questions, so guys, please feel free to post your questions using Q&A tab, and let's start. So the very first question is likelihood of getting a GMAT waiver, 11 years of experience through military for cyber operations for cyber sales.
So I would say that it really depends on which program you're applying to. If you're applying to like the executive MBA or the part-time MBA, that might come in handy, but actually, it's a case-by-case situation, I assume. I'm not sure that Kellogg is actually doing a waiver this year for the full-time MBA program. Now I'm questioning my knowledge. I'm like, but I would definitely reach out to the Kellogg Admissions Committee and ask them. It's completely fine to email them. They want to talk to you. They want to answer your questions. So don't feel like, oh, if I ask a silly question, that they're going to file it away and they're going to bring it up at the AdCom roundtable when I'm like finally getting a decision. So, you can ask questions ahead of your application or interview. So don't feel like it's going to, change your outcome, unless like the only time that anybody makes a serious note in your file is if something wasn't nice or was wrong.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you. Let's go next. I heard that for some students who have already interviewed, that their interviews lasted only 15-20 minutes. Is it a red flag?
No. I would say that it just depends on the interviewer. And from what we know or have seen, Kellogg doesn't have like a prescribed menu of like, you have to ask, these specific questions or so many from this section and this section, this section. So, it's a variation of, in the end, did you find out what their goals are and if they fit with the school, and are they going to be a good fit with you as a student? Would they be a good person to sit next to for the next 2 years? So, if your interview runs over or is short, I would say, like, did you feel like you were able to communicate who you were and what you want to do? And how did they kind of respond? It could be that they were short on time and they're like, I need to make this as efficient as can be. So it just depends. I wouldn't necessarily call it a red flag.
Yep, thank you. Let's go next. If we got one of these questions in our video essays or answered them in our essay, is it okay to give a similar response, or does it depend on if you are being interviewed by an AO versus student alum? Like if we mentioned 2 clubs we'd like to be a part of, can we mention the same clubs, or should we talk about the others we'd like to join but didn't have space to mention?
So, with the blind interview, they technically won't have anything beyond your resume. So you can feel free to reference anything else from throughout the application process. You can reiterate experiences, clubs, etc. That'll be absolutely fine. But if you felt like you didn't get to include something, this is your opportunity to bring it in, right? Like you get to have the final word, so to say. And so they can make those notes and maybe add them to your file in addition to what the admissions committee will see from their perspective.
Thank you. The next question, should why MBA now question include the goals as well?
So this is kind of, it's tangled together, right? The why MBA, why now, what are your goals? These 3 questions kind of all intersect with each other. So the way that I like to talk about this is that you can kind of give a very succinct version of it, is like, and now I'm ready to pivot into marketing. And that's why I'm seeking the MBA. And then that gives them the ability to say, okay, so what are your goals? So you're not giving it all away of like, oh, I want to go to marketing, I want to work in this place and this place, and then ultimately lead to this. Instead, you're giving them the opportunity to prompt you and guide you and lead you on this interview process. Again, them having the ownership and leading the interview is part of their role, and you want them to walk away feeling like they did control the interview, so to say. And if it kind of accidentally like weaves in and you do it on accident, it's not that big of a deal. You're still answering all the questions they need. So if you get nervous and it happens, it's going to be okay. It's all how you recover and how you kind of put it together. But ultimately give them just a little preview of what you want to do if that's related to the YMBA, and then they can ask you officially, what are your short-term and long-term goals? And then you can give a more specific answer with the companies and the roles that you're interested in.
Thank you. The next question, what is the most common mistake that people do during MBA interviews? If interviewer says that I'm very experienced, should I find this approach tricky?
Okay, so I would say the most common mistakes are what we call like word vomit. Like people just come in and they just, and like they just spill it all out before they even got like asked multiple questions. So again, like I think we just kind of went through that process, but make sure that you're letting them ask questions and not just going in and saying what you want to say. Listen to the question, because sometimes like the first question is tell me about yourself and not necessarily walk me through your resume. Those are 2 different questions that can be answered in different ways. So walk me through your resume is, a bit more professionally focused. And you can say like, and then, outside, I like to do this. Tell me about yourself is a bit more, I don't want to say creative, but it doesn't have to be as structured of like, I went from this place to this place to this place. It's much more of like, I've always been guided about my passion for helping people and this, in college. And then, you kind of have a little bit more of a story to it. But yeah, so listen to what the actual question is, like I need to do right now. The other one is that people, if they mess up, they kind of get tripped up and they stop and then they go blank and things like that. Honestly, like you are human. It's okay if you make a mistake or I don't want to say like say the wrong thing, but if something happens, it's all in the recovery, right? Like no one is expecting you to be absolutely perfect. Especially with Kellogg, right? Like this is all about humility, low ego. This is, they want a real person in this interview scenario. And so don't be too caught up in that. If the interviewer says you're very experienced, I think it's really hard to not let your self-doubts leak in. So don't read into that. Or you could read into it in a good way. Like think about things always positive of like, if they say you're very experienced, like, yeah, I've spent a lot of time in the sustainability industry and now I want to move into this arena, right? Like, I think you can affirm it if you want, like if it's a good thing, then move on from it. But don't get in your head about it because likely they didn't mean anything negative about it, especially like, again, with Kellogg, I think it's a very positive experience. They're trying to admit you, whereas some other schools, they're trying to eliminate possibilities.
Thank you. Let's go next. Let's say it's 40 minutes interview. Ideally, how much % of time should interviewer speak and how much time should I speak? Should it be a soft-spoken, relaxed interview? For me, the interviewer is the same age group and current student in the second year. How should I make him comfortable and not show much of my out-of-the-world achievements? And what should be the overall demeanor, like a friendly or showcase the achievements? And what are they looking for?
Okay, so a lot of questions maybe that we answered some previously. I'm not sure, but I wish that there was like a golden rule of like, 25% them, 75% you. It really just depends on the interviewer. Me, I talk a bit like I'll give you a reason as to why I'm asking a question. Like during the MBA program, you're going to be thrown into many situations where nobody isn't assigned in a leadership role. Tell me about a time where you were in a situation where you had to assume leadership or divert to somebody else, or what role would you play in an, like I would give you some sort of context and then ask the question. So some people do that, some people don't. So I don't necessarily have a rule, but there definitely should be a dyad between the two of you, right? Like they should ask a question and you should answer it. Then they should ask a question and you should answer it. Should you be soft-spoken and relaxed? So again, like going with the atmosphere and personality of Kellogg, again, like it's coming from a place of like, we want to be friends, we want to be Kellogg, we want to be colleagues. And, that's kind of what they're looking for. So I would come in with that expectation that this should be a friendly, comfortable experience, right? Like that this is, we're on the same playing field. If you have a lot of accomplishments, that's okay. You don't have to downplay your experience. I think isn't how you talk about it. There's some schools where it's maybe better to say, when I was working on this project, I was able to do this and achieve this goal. With Kellogg, I think it's better to say, I was working on this project with a team and we were able to accomplish this goal, or I was able to help guide our team to accomplishing this goal, right? So it's all in how you phrase it and kind of package it together to fit the personality of that school.
Thank you. Let's go next. You mentioned that interview invites are usually sent on a rolling basis, but what's the latest cut-off by which I can expect an invite?
Yeah, so I would say November, like end of November. I know that sounds crazy, but they will continuously invite people throughout the time. So again, like that's why I'm saying, like, if you haven't gotten an interview invite yet, but you submitted on time, don't freak out yet because I think they do try to match you with somebody. And so if that doesn't work out, then you move over to a different pile of trying to match with time zones or something like that, right? So, don't freak out, but the latest is going to be probably mid to late November.
Thank you. How much does the interview weigh into admissions? Also, do we know roughly what the evaluation rubric looks like?
So I would say that your interview, if you get invited to interview for most schools, it means you're admissible, right? Like you check all the boxes of what they're looking for in a candidate. You seem interesting. You have goals that make sense for them. And this is the litmus test. And I would say that it's, maybe closer to like 20% of what counts in the actual application process. So it's pretty substantial. So I think it's important. If you felt like you blew it, don't look at it that way. But I don't know necessarily that they have a rubric specifically because they have such a wide spectrum of people that are interviewing. I think it's probably much more of, do the goals fit? Like there's probably like 3 or 4 questions, and would you recommend for them to be admitted or not? So again, it's like career fit, personality fit, goal fit, yes or no.
Thank you. Could the interview have some problem-solving questions, and should we be prepared for something like that?
Not really in this one. Typically, that's not a question that's asked of Kellogg. There are some other schools where they'll ask you to problem solve. LBS will ask some sort of question like that, like a case question. Not too crazy, so don't get freaked out about it, but they'll ask you something. As far as, they're not going to ask you to problem solve on the spot, but if they ask you about a time when you problem solved, you should have an answer for that. Yeah.
Thank you. The next one, thanks for this wonderful session. And I have one question. What if we are asked if we have got interviews invites from other schools? How to answer that?
Yeah. So, and even some of the schools ask this in their application form, right? So it's not unheard of. Sometimes it's for peer research, right? Like, are you applying to other schools? It's not going to have any bearing on whether you're admitted to our school or not. It's more of, we want to make sure we know who our peer schools are, like who else the same group of people are applying to. When I was an interviewer, we asked that question. And again, like we framed it as, this has no bearing, but it also helps them potentially later on when they're trying to admit you to say like, we're better than this other school, and they can know where they stand in your kind of hierarchy of schools that you're applying to and if it's a good fit. I usually say you can say kind of peer schools that are in that same kind of stratosphere. It's almost a given that if you're applying to Kellogg, most of the time you'll apply to Chicago just because of location. Like if you're open to Chicago, then you're open to, like if you're open to Chicago, Illinois, you're open to the University of Chicago as well as Kellogg. So, putting those both into perspective, there's probably going to be a natural assumption. Same thing, Oxford, Cambridge, MIT, Harvard, like those kind of things, people that are in the same, or schools that are in the same city. So that might be a given, right? That they're going to think they're going to apply to Chicago. And then you can maybe say one above or below kind of Kellogg, or you can just be honest. There's, again, like no penalty in it. I wouldn't read too much into the question, even though it feels like it could mean something, but it probably is just for research, to be honest.
Thank you. Could you share an example of a student with lower GPA test scores and what Kellogg saw in this individual that granted him or her admission?
Yeah, so I will say that I'm trying to think of, I had a client with a below 700 GMAT score way back when. So that's below a 645 now. And so he didn't have quote unquote that, high GMAT score, closer to like the 720, 730 side, but he had high academics and then he had experience and he was able to connect that specifically to the tech side of the Kellogg MBA. And I believe that is what really got him over that hump, of being able to show this true connection of why he wanted to be in Chicago at Kellogg and the connections that it had within the community to help him get to his next career or next step in his career. And he was able to connect the dots for the AdCom so that it was kind of like, it's a no-brainer. We definitely want this guy to be here. And they felt like it was worth the risk of having somebody a little bit lower on the GMAT side to be able to have a high success rate. So it's always figuring out how to balance that out for the AdCom is, what can you, like, if you're going to take away from their GMAT score or GPA or not add to diversity, then what can you give in exchange? And so hopefully that's a high GPA or, strong work background, experience, leadership, or connection to the school.
Thank you. Jen, we have 3 more minutes till the end of the session. Unfortunately, we have to do the hard stop. So let's have 3 or 4 more questions. Let's go. When answering two distinct interview questions, is it acceptable to use the same project but frame the response using different aspects? For instance, using a single project to illustrate both a conflict resolution scenario and a demonstration of leadership.
You can use the same scenario if you don't have a different one. And if you're like on the spot and you're like, I can't come up with something different, you can say, going back to the situation where I was sharing this conflict, I believe that my leadership, whatever that might have been, right? Like you could refer back to it. I've had people do it, and it's worked. It's been fine, but don't do it for every single question. I would say you only want to use the situation twice max.
Thank you. What's the ideal duration for daily exercise to be ready for interview?
Get out your training shoes. No, so I would say that you want to be practicing with your friends, with your family members, have somebody ask you the questions. I would say, I wish I could say like a daily exercise. I don't know, like at least, 3 or 4 times during the day would be ideal, just because you don't want to come off rehearsed. So the best prep is to figure out the same way to say this, communicate the same information in several different ways so that no matter how it comes out in the interview, you were able to communicate it, but it wasn't rehearsed like line by line.
Thank you. As a South Asian IT applicant with 4 years of software engineering experience, I'm aware that this is one of the most overrepresented profiles in the global applicant pool. From an admissions or interviewer's perspective, what specific qualities or differentiators truly make such candidates stand out? Beyond strong test scores, how can someone in this demographic craft a compelling narrative that convinces the committee?
Thanks so much for being such a great narrator, Alina. Okay, so I think this applies to a lot of people. And in the end, the way to stand out to an admissions committee is by being you. Be authentic. Think about the things that are different about you, your experiences that are different from other people. Yes, you might be a software engineer, but what did you work on? What were you able to accomplish in this role? What companies did you work with? What countries did you work with? How did your narrative and experience give some different sort of perspective? And how does it relate back and reflect within the within like your MBA experience? How will it reflect in your MBA experience? So you want to be able to show this genuine story of who you are and be able to communicate that in a way that the AdCom says, wow, we've never had anybody else that's a software engineer, but also started a business selling t-shirts when they were in what is it, step 12? I can't remember like what they call it, like, but essentially like high school or college, you know, like there's these different things that you can always bring to the table, or you grew up in a family business. These different little things about you and your background really can make a difference in your application and stand out to the admissions committee.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Jen, and thanks everyone. Unfortunately, we don't have any more time for questions, and we have to end the session. Again, feel free to use the QR code Jen is sharing on her slides to book a call with her. And don't forget to connect to our next session. The current Kellogg student will be telling about their experience, and we'll be happy to answer your more questions. The session is in 15 minutes, so please don't forget to join the next session. And yeah, thanks everyone, and thanks, Jennifer.
Thanks, everybody. Look forward to talking to you all later. Good luck.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.